Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be sharing my time with the honourable member from Red Deer Mountain View. Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House to speak on the Natural Resource Committee's report on the future of Canada's oil and gas sector. Oil and gas is very important to my riding of Yellowhead, which is a large region west of Edmonton into the Rocky Mountains. Within my riding, there have been many discussions and comments regarding the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline. This is because it's of great importance to us. Most people don't realize that over a third of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, more than 300 kilometers of pipe, run through the heart of Yellowhead. It plays a significant role in the economy of our region. The constituents of my riding and Alberta rarely complain. We are hardworking people, and we have a diversified economy throughout the province. Besides oil and gas, Yellowhead has coal mining, agriculture, forestry, and tourism. And as I said, people do not complain much, and we are hardworking people. But we saw a lot of large protests dealing with the carbon tax, and I've heard from many of the constituents with concerns over the recent things that are happening with the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Just on the outskirts of my town of Edson, we have a massive area covered with pipe that is waiting to go into the ground. I know I can't use props or anything, Mr. Speaker, in here, and I'm not going to, but I'd just like my colleagues in here just to imagine, take all the property from the Supreme Court, the green area in front, take the Justice Building, take the Confederation Building, take the West Block, take the building we're into, take East Block, and move all the way over to the Chateau Laurier. Take all that land and just imagine it stacked with 24-inch pipe, 4 high. That's what we have on the outskirts of Edson. Thousands of kilometers of pipe just waiting to be put into the ground, Mr. Speaker. Then imagine on the side, a line of picker trucks just sitting there waiting to load the pipe to take it to its destination. All of this has been sitting for quite a while, corroding, wasting money, space, and jobs. So you can imagine that when there was an announcement this summer that 290 kilometers of preliminary work was beginning, flagging, clearing of the ground, and preparing to lay pipeline, people in my community celebrated. They had tailgate parties, barbecues. They were so happy to see themselves going back to work. People were excited about able to be moving into the area, buying new homes or vehicles, and finally getting back to a real good, solid work base. Then we were absolutely devastated to learn that the Federal Court of Appeal overturned the federal government's approval of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, concluded that the Liberals failed to engage in meaningful consultations with the First Nations. After all the rule changing they did and everything else, they failed. I heard from realtors who lost house sales, automobile dealership who lost vehicle sales. Investment in the region immediately halted. Oil and gas development in Yellowhead is important, and I can't stress enough the significant impact this Liberal government's failure has had on our region. Why, Mr. Speaker, have the Liberals failed? I think this report provides a pretty good outline as to why. In February of 2016, the Standing Committee on Natural Resources undertook a study on the future of Canada's oil and gas, mining, and nuclear sectors. The resulting report from this Liberal government-dominated committees failed to adequately represent the testimony presented by the witnesses unless it favored their strategies or ideas. In other words, the government cherry-picked the information that would be back up their own agenda instead of representing the full testimony of witnesses. They refused to realize the reality of the situation we are facing. For example, the report as presented included testimony in favor of carbon tax, but failed to provide the testimony which spoke of adverse effects of carbon tax would have on industry and consumers across Canada. One witness stated, unless the carbon tax is aligned with trading partners, the price of carbon can cause a lack of competitiveness. This should be of concern to people concerned about the climate, as well as the people concerned about the economy, because if you simply move business to other jurisdictions, you're not actually reducing overall carbon emissions. The idea would be carbon pricing that's North America or even worldwide, which would prevent those kinds. So we have to have everybody buy into the scheme. If we're doing it, we're not encouraging anybody, because people will just buy the oil and gas from third world countries, which are polluting a lot worse than we are here in Alberta or Canada. But recommendation 5 of the report completely disregards this reality and encourages the carbon tax program in Canada, which will make us uncompetitive and continue to chase investment out of Canada. By the way, foreign investment has plunged to the lowest it's been in 8 years under this government. Other witnesses testified conveniently that they left out the report that stated Canada contributes less than 2% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. 2%, Mr. Speaker. And if we refer to China, it's at about 28%, and the United States is at about 15% of the greenhouse gas emissions. This Liberal government's narrative against Canada's natural resource development has been predicated on the assumption that the current regulation framework is broken and it needs to be changed to restore public confidence and the trust of Canadians. Yet, Mr. Speaker, this government refuses to recognize that we contribute less than 2% of global emissions and that Canada's standards are the best in the world. That's not just a talking point, Mr. Speaker. That is backed up by reports from many of the witnesses that gave testimony that was conveniently left out of the report. As one witness stated, Canada also has world-leading environmental regulations. Of the top oil reserve holders, only Canada is covered by world-class, stringent environmental regulations and oversight. End of the quote. And companies have worked under our environment framework for years with success. As stated by another witness, over the past 10 years, under the NEB auspices, several pipelines have been built. Certainly the Line 9 pipeline was approved under National Energy Board process. The Access pipeline and the initial Keystone pipelines were built. There is a list of pipelines that went through the regulatory process under National Energy Board that went through consultation, that went through environmental review, and that were built. My point is that we have a strong process in place that was reliable, effective, and held the trust of Canadians. So why is investment declining? It's declining because the Liberal government has created regulatory uncertainty in their new assessment process for natural resource infrastructure project. For comparison, the original Trans Mountain pipeline was proposed in the March of 1951, and construction began in February of 52, and it was flowing oil in 53. That's less than a year to move that process. In 2004, Kinder Morgan began the process to add the second pipeline, running parallel to the first. In 2008, the project was approved and completed. That's only 4 years to move the process. Then in 2013, Kinder Morgan began the application process for Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, and now, 5 years later, we are back to the consultation phase thanks to the Liberals' mismanagement of the energy file. Why would other companies want to invest in a country where it takes 5+ years to go through the process, and even then there's no guarantee that a pipeline will be built? It's unfortunate that the Liberals have cancelled and held up Canadian pipelines. Stopping pipelines in Canada does not speed up the development of alternates to oil, and it doesn't slow down the growing oil demand in emerging economies. As stated by another witness in the study, transportation infrastructure is required to meet these growing energy needs, and pipelines remain the safest and most efficient and lowest greenhouse gas intensive way of moving energy over long distances. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.